I suck at meditation. Do you feel like that sometimes? Because if you do, then this episode is exactly what you've been looking for. Today, we're going to dive into why you may be feeling like that and also share practical tips on how you can improve your meditation techniques. Before we get started, you may notice that someone very special is missing, and that is Celestina. She can't join us in this episode. She will hopefully be back for next episode, but for today, I've brought along Luc, my bougie stuffed animal duck. If you cannot see it, you may want to go to YouTube and check it out. So we are going to try to hold down the fort, Luc and I, and dive right into this topic. Speaking of meditation, I have a meditation podcast. If you do want to have a few guided meditations to listen to, go check it out. It's going to be linked in the description. It's the Opportunity Meditations podcast. My own personal experience with meditation started approximately 10 years ago. And that was in India. When I first arrived to India, I didn't believe in a higher power. I didn't believe in energy work. Everything that I could touch was real. Everything that was scientifically proven made sense to me. Everything else didn't. Meditation was a difficult thing for me to connect with. The only way for me to connect with this topic was through yoga, because I met the right teachers at the right time. And the first yoga teachers that I had, they were extremely spiritual themselves, but they were able to pick me up where I was. And that was definitely not on the spiritual plane. I was very much on the physical plane. And that's what they did. They practiced yoga asanas with me. They did very active, very sports, quote unquote, yoga. And this is how I started to actually feel a big difference in my energy. While practicing yoga for 2 weeks, for hours and hours in a day, because we joined a retreat, I got to feel a huge shift in my own energy. Before joining this yoga retreat, I was depressed and I felt like my emotions were covered in cotton. It just all felt numb. After joining this yoga retreat, I started to feel like these emotions were starting to come out again. And along with that, once I realized this shift in my energy, I thought, okay, if physical movements can help me regain access to my emotions and make me feel more energized and vital, what can breathing exercises then give me? So I started to practice the breathing exercises that my teachers gave me, and I started to also feel a shift there. So I started to feel better and better. And eventually I started to think, okay, maybe I should give this meditation thing a try. And that's when this whole thing started. My whole meditation journey started. I tried to figure out which kind of meditation was right for me, because there are thousands of different styles, different techniques, different ways to approach meditation. And it is not about simply having to quiet your mind. Especially when you look at it from a human design perspective, you're going to see very quickly that some people are going to have a harder time silencing their mind, and other people are going to have an easier time silencing their mind. And it really is not the goal of meditation. So if you're one of those people that feel frustrated while meditating, try to focus on the end result. How do you feel after the meditation, instead of focusing on how you feel during the meditation? Because we're all going through this, oh my God, I'm so frustrated, and I'm going to think of my shopping list that I have to do and all the things that I have to do for work and for my family and everything that just comes flowing and rushing into your mind as soon as you decide to sit down and meditate. This can reduce with the right techniques, with the right guidance for you. And human design can be a very, very helpful tool for you to figure out what that means for you. So for today, I decided to use a celebrity's chart. And every time we look for a celebrity's time of birth and date of birth, we go to astrotheme.com. And when I went there today, one of the celebrities that popped up as one of the most searched women of yesterday was Zendaya. And because I really like her style and I like her down-to-earth approach, I decided, that would be a great one to cover today. I hope that Celestina is going to agree to do an episode of Tom Holland and Zendaya. But if you would like to listen to one of those, leave your comment below. Let us know. Here we are, Zendaya's design. So what we're going to be focusing on are a few areas. When you are looking at someone's human design, there are many things that you can focus on. You could spend weeks looking at just one design if you had all the themes in the world open to your choosing. So because today our theme is relatively pinpointed to meditation, it makes it a little bit easier to give a focal point to this whole design. The first thing that pops into my eyes is the head center being undefined. So she does have gate 61 defined, but it's in an undefined head center, meaning there is not a consistent energy flow towards this gate 61, which is in her Neptune. This is also her inner knowing. This is very powerful when it comes to receiving insights from source. With an undefined head center, however, what also happens is that you keep picking up informations from all over the place. So if a transit, if a planet is currently defining the head center for her, then she may feel more pressure than usual when it comes to inspiration and ideas and answering the questions that really are not there for her to answer, but that are just floating around in the universe. Another way that you can see this is if you're surrounded by a lot of people. Zendaya, in this case, would be able to read the thoughts, read all the questions of the people around her, even though she may not be aware of this ability. So she may be thinking that those are all her thoughts and those are all her questions to answer. So instead of that, a place for her to meditate would actually be either out in nature by herself, where there's no noise from the surrounding, from the people around her, no thoughts of the other people that she's picking up. But in that case, she would also have to be mindful of the transits. So if a planet is defining her head center, it would make it more difficult for her to clear her mind. And by clearing the mind, I just want to be very clear here. When we're clearing the mind, it's not that there are no thoughts coming in and out. It's about recognizing that there is a thought that may be coming in and then let it pass. One of my first meditations that I went to, it was at a Buddhist monk center. And in this place, they were describing a blue sky and your thoughts being clouds that pass by this blue sky. And instead of just holding on to your thought and having it be clouding the sky, you recognize the cloud and you let it pass. So this is kind of what an undefined head center would try to achieve, and there would most likely be less clouds in their sky than a defined head center. So a defined head center can feel enormous amounts of pressure, enormous amounts of just continuously running thoughts through their minds, and not being able to quiet their mind as an undefined head center would be able to. That being said, the ideal environment for an undefined head center is really by themselves if their goal of a meditation is really to clear their mind. There are other ways to go about it. So when I'm looking at Zendaya's chart, I can see that she's got two collective logical channels. She's got one tribal and she's got one individual. So it's relatively balanced. I would say there is more tribal energy and more collective energy because her tribal channel is defined by her conscious sun and her conscious earth. So this is a very heavy placement, very strong placement in her chart. And when you have a lot of tribal energy in your chart, then you are someone that also benefits potentially. It depends on the rest of your chart. As always, you always have to look at it in a full picture. But you potentially also benefit from being in small, intimate group dynamics, such as going to a church or being part of a choir, where you're breathing together and where you consider these individuals your tribe. When you have a lot of collective circuitry, it is more about a larger group dynamic. So for example, going to a protest and being part of this group, all saying the same things, this is also a type of breathing exercise. If you have a lot of individual circuitry, you would probably prefer meditating on your own. So this is just a little bit about circuitry, which is a great way to start understanding what your preferences are when it comes to group dynamics. However, we did talk about Zendaya's undefined head, and we would also look at her undefined G-center. So this means that her social surrounding and her environment are extremely important to her in the way that she needs to really feel good, supported, and secure in her environment. So let me just break this down 1 second, because this can be very complex and very confusing when you're looking at your own chart. And that is why you should always consider having a reading done by a professional human design expert. You can get a reading from me or Celestina or from any other expert that you prefer. But the confusion that can happen, so you have the undefined head center, which is suggesting that you should meditate by yourself. Then you have the tribal and the collective circuitry, which is suggesting that you should be in group dynamic environments. So either a large group or a smaller group. She does have the individual circuitry, but it is not as prominent in her chart. Then comes the fact that she's a 5-1 profile. The 5 suggests that she would be great with strangers. The 1 suggests that she really needs foundation and in-depth knowledge and insights, but also a feeling of security in some ways when it comes to her physical body. This is in her unconscious side, in her physical body side. This is where the 1 resides. Additionally to that, she's a triple split definition. Therefore, she is someone that actually benefits from moving from one place to another, from one social surrounding to another, from one group of people to another. So just flying through different scenarios, environments, and people. So one way to do that is to sit on her bicycle or rollerblading through the city or wherever she may be, but just flowing through a group of people without being fixed. The G-center is again saying how important her environment is, how important the people around her are. Not just for her to feel good, but also for her to be aligned with who she is, to find direction, but also to understand what love really is about. And to then add to the confusion, we can look at the variables. And the variables are these arrows here. We have the digestion variable, which is the top left one. We have the bottom left one, that's the environment. We have the bottom right one, that's the perspective. And then we have the top right one, that's the motivation. So we're going to be looking at these variables in Zendaya's case, just to show you the complexity of all of this, but also to provide you with an understanding of how you can find the right meditation style for you. From a center's perspective, before getting to the variables, we can also see that she has all 4 motor centers defined, which gives her a lot of energy. She is someone that really has an immense amount of energy within her. With her 4 motors defined, she has the sacral that provides her with consistent life force energies. She has the root, which provides her with bursts of energy. She has the emotional solar plexus, which provides her with emotional energy. And she has the ego, which provides her with willpower. So she is definitely someone that needs to power herself out before she can even think about meditating. Because if she would just wake up in the morning and sit down to meditate, there would be so much energy pent up inside of her that she wouldn't be able to sit still. She wouldn't be able to find calmness and peace of her mind without exercising first. So this is a style that Osho was very known for. He was someone that was always exhausting his participants or his followers. So he would physically exhaust them before he would guide them into meditation. And that would be my recommendation for Zendaya as well, for her to really exhaust herself physically before attempting meditation. She is a generator, so she is not a manifesting generator. If you were a manifesting generator, then it's not just about physical exhaustion, it is also about mental exhaustion. And it's not exhaustion to the point where you can't move anymore and you feel depleted. It is an exhaustion that feels good for generators and manifesting generators. It feels like they've done something with their day. That's the kind of exhaustion that works best for these individuals, not just for meditation, but also to fall asleep at night. So now that we've looked at her motor centers, additionally to all of that, we're going to take a look at her variables. And her variables, as I said, most of them are pointing to the left, but her digestion variable is pointing to the right. The ones that I would personally focus on for meditation would be the environment variable, which is the bottom left arrow, and that is an active environment. So she is thriving more in an environment which is motivating her to be active. So her meditations are probably more beneficial if it's a moving meditation. Additionally to that, I would also look at the perspective arrow. And that is a left-facing arrow as well, which is the focused perspective. So instead of having the peripheral perspective, where she just picks up everything while she's doing other things, this would be a peripheral perspective. She is someone who needs to focus her attention to something instead of having her awareness onto many different things at once. So a moving meditation would be great. It doesn't have to be fast-paced. It can be Ashtanga yoga, for example, but this would only become a meditation once you are routined in the flow of the movements. So Ashtanga yoga is a form of yoga which is very strict and has the same sequence over and over again. There are several different sequences, they build up upon one another, but essentially they remain the same. So once you've really learned this off by heart and you're doing this flow, you're in a form of meditation because your body knows what to do, and you, in your mind, in your energy, you can step into the meditative process. So Qigong would be something similar, where you can also be doing the movements, and once you know the movements off by heart, it's a form of meditation. So a moving meditation would be great. As I said, riding a bicycle, for example, can be a form of meditation for her because she's moving through the different auras from different people. She's moving, she's still focused on her task, so at riding the bike, but it wouldn't be too distracting because there are not too many other things that are going on. So I wouldn't recommend driving next to a very busy road or something like this. But just in a safe space through a park, for example, this would be a great location for her to drive through the auras of other people without having to worry about her safety again, the first line. That being said, she's a celebrity, so it's not that easy for her to just grab her bike and ride through a park without any consequences. So when we take another look at her variable, and I can only do this because her date of birth and time of birth seems to be very accurate, which provides me the opportunity to dive into the variables. So when we're also looking at her environment, she is someone that is a mountain environment, and as we mentioned, a left-facing mountain environment, which means that she would thrive more and be more inspired, but also probably feel more grounded in certain ways in higher elevations. So she's also someone that would benefit from reducing her oxygen intake. What I mean by that is that she should focus more on her exhales instead of her inhales. So she probably naturally does that as a mountain individual, reducing her oxygen intake, but this would be something that would help her meditative practice. Additionally to that, she's someone that has outer vision in her tone environment. And this means that when meditating, it is still about the outer vision. So as you can see here in the perspective, it's about focus and having something to focus on. So another way for her to meditate would, for example, be if she prefers to go out into nature, be by herself, practice a silent meditation, for example, it would be to have a focus, to keep her eyes open, actually, in her case, instead of closing them, because she's an outer vision individual. So visualizations, guided meditations may be a bit difficult for her. Would be interesting to know her side of the story. But when she has a focus, such as Trataka meditation, which is where you often, well, it's a meditation of focus, but a lot of times back in the day, they would focus on the flame of a candle. And you would just focus on that candle, and within this focus, you would start to fall into a meditative space. So this would be an additional option for her to just try it out when it comes to meditative practices. So as you can see, this is a very complex thing to dissect. And at the end, you would have approximately 1, 2, or 3 meditative practices that you can try out for yourself to see what works for you. But we've already narrowed it down. So I personally had to try out all of that within the last 10 years or so, probably a bit less. So I started to learn about human design and I got to narrow it down further. But I had already a good idea of what works and what doesn't work for me. But it was all because I tried and tested it. Human design helps me narrow it down drastically from the thousands of meditative practices and ways to go about meditating and the frustrations that some of you feel when meditating. It is so helpful to understand, hey, I have an undefined head, and this is why I'm having such difficulties meditating, because I'm doing it in the wrong environment, around the wrong people, etc. So with a defined head, you would just have a lot of pressure that is constantly there, a lot of thoughts that are constantly there. Whereas the undefined head, they can go out and leave the space of all the inspiration that is floating around and all the mental pressure and answering the questions that are not theirs. A defined head can't just escape this. It is there within you all the time. But don't worry about this, because one way around this for a defined head individual is to use guided meditations, and then depending on the rest of your design, to focus on whether or not you have more collective energy, tribal energy, which motor centers are defined or undefined, and really find a meditation style where you have more of a focus. It's not just about necessarily having to listen to guided meditations, but it's also about having an inner focus. So some people may prefer to focus on their breath instead of having to listen to something all the time. Other people prefer to just practice mindfulness instead of meditation. This is another thing that is very important, where mindfulness you can practice at any point in time, no matter where you are, no matter when, no matter what the circumstances outside are, because you don't have to take space. You don't have to be like, hey, I need to go sit somewhere quiet and meditate. You can just practice it right now. So if you don't know what mindfulness is about, there is more information online. Just check it out. Today we're talking about meditation, so let's focus on that topic. But there are many things that you can do even with a defined head. It doesn't mean you can't meditate. And as I said, the goal is not necessarily to have an absolute quiet mind. It is about reducing the chatter and having more awareness in the moment, relaxing, de-stressing your nervous system, and really feel into what meditation feels like after practicing, instead of focusing so much and putting so much pressure onto yourself during the meditation process. So a few tips for beginners when it comes to meditation is start slow, start small. Instead of saying, okay, I'm going to have to meditate half an hour every day, just do 5 minutes. Or if that's even too much, start with 3 minutes. Set yourself a timer and start with 3 minutes a day. and then work your way up. Maybe 30 seconds more every week or every other day, however you feel about this whole process. Also, it's not about necessarily having to sit still. As we've mentioned, there can also be moving meditations. There are many, many different styles and versions of meditations that I cannot cover in this video. But if you would like to know more about it, then I'm sure there's plenty of information online. So find the style that works for you and use your human design chart to gain deeper insights into this. Choose a consistent time of day if you can, where you simply choose a time slot that is your me time. Whether you're going to end up meditating for all of it or just some of it, that can be flexible. But try to fix a slot in your day which is just for you. It doesn't have to be the same routine within that slot. We're going to be doing an episode regarding routines and regarding on how to set your goals. So stay tuned for that and subscribe if you're interested in that. But when it comes to having a set time for yourself in your day, this is very helpful. And then just use 3 minutes of that time for the beginning to start your meditative practice. Consistency is key here. It's not about the length of the meditation. Science has shown that there is plenty of benefit, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, but it is really about consistently doing it every single day. This is what is going to help you regulate your emotions, regulate your stress hormones, and many other benefits that meditation comes with. And most importantly, be patient with yourself. Don't put so much pressure on yourself that you started making a grocery list in your head again, or that you just couldn't calm down your thoughts. You will see every single day your practice will be different, and go at it with curiosity. Be curious about what is going to happen today. So when you've chosen a meditative approach that feels right to you, and follow your intuition when doing that, follow your strategy if you can, and follow your inner authority to make the right decision. So any type out there, I invite you to look into this. And if your sacral is responding and saying, hell yes, I want to try this right now, then follow that. If your inner authority is an emotional one, take a few days to think about this and feel into it more. Not really use your mind, but more, how does it feel to start a meditative practice? So use both. Use your strategy, use your inner authority, and dive into this. And once you've chosen the style that you want to practice, try it for several weeks before changing the meditation style that you've chosen. Because it does take a little bit of time, a little bit of practice to feel whether this really is or is not meant for you. And if you really don't feel any kind of difference after trying it for several weeks, and feel into it right after the meditative practice. So if for several weeks you don't feel any difference after every single meditation, then maybe consider changing the style. So before ending this episode, I would also like to mention the importance of asteroids. I personally love using asteroids when I'm working with my clients, just because it gives me yet another level of depth to how their practice should look like, how their routines should look like. It depends on what we're looking at. But when it comes to meditation, for example, I had a client who was practicing Kundalini yoga, and she loved this practice. She wanted to do this every single day for hours a day. And she started to wonder if this was really what she should be doing, because she felt like other people would probably start to judge her. And when looking at her human design chart and also looking at the asteroid aspect of things, we could see that Kali was in a very prominent position in her chart. And Kali is very strongly connected to Kundalini. In her chart, Kali was in the root center, so practicing Kundalini yoga was actually extremely beneficial for her, and that's why it was such a huge thing for her, such a comforting thing for her. Additionally to that, we also found Iris in her chart. An iris is strongly connected to rainbow, and there were other elements which were also pointing towards water as an important part of her element. Water and nature. So yes, nature is important for everyone, but when there is an accumulation of different asteroids and different aspects that are prominent in a chart of a person, depending on the theme that we're looking at, we can really provide extremely useful insights. So in her case, I recommended spending more time in nature, which she did. She hadn't done this much previously, but after the session, she started doing it more and started to feel a huge shift and a huge difference within herself. Additionally to that, she also started working more with crystals, even rainbows when it came out, to meditate during the time of a rainbow, or to meditate with different colors, to meditate with different crystals at different points in times. So this was extremely helpful and changed her meditative practice a lot. As you can see, if you've ever thought that you suck at meditation, I hope this episode showed you that maybe you were just not using the right technique of meditation, and you didn't cut yourself enough slack, or you just didn't know which direction to go into, or which techniques to try. I hope this episode helped you, and if you would like to look into the guided meditations, check out the Opportunity Meditations podcast. And don't forget to follow and subscribe if you want to know more helpful tools and techniques and insights when it comes to human design. Thank you so much for listening, and see you in the next episode. Bye.